So in this video, we are actually going to create the beard. But before that, as you can see, I'm basically doing the same thing. I am actually masking out the area where the beard is going to grow from. And I am going to exclude the mustache in this one because mustache is going to be its own separate thing. So you can actually see that I am actually just masking out the area where the beard is going to be growing from. After we are done with that, we are basically just going to do the same process that we've done with the hairs, like the head hairs. As you can clearly see, what I'm actually trying to do, just trying to create these masks. Again, you can actually do the same thing with either the vertex color or the weight paint. It is totally up to you. Both of those are actually gonna work. In this case, I have actually used the image texture, which I have to save after I am done masking. As you can see that I am basically again in the sculpt mode. Again, I'm gonna do the same thing. So first thing first, I'll actually need to enable the symmetry. And the idea is pretty simple again. I am gonna start from the edges, like from where the hairs are started to grow. And as you can see, my first guide is basically in the same place. I guess I actually wanted the same hair thickness. That's why I basically am just going to copy the value from the nodes from the hairs. You can see that I basically just copied the node and then I basically just pasted it into the beard node group. So now we are using the same thickness and same profile for both of these hairs. And I think the material is also the same, if I'm not mistaken. No. Material is actually not the same. Right now, material is default, but now I'm assigning the same material as you can see. Yes. So, yeah, this is what I'm doing right now. After I'm done with that, I'll actually just start doing similar thing that I've done with the head hair. You can see that I'm basically just decreasing the viewport value in the head hair so that the hairs would not be like laggy. The viewport won't be laggy. Now you can see that I'm using the same mask in the beard in the interpolate modifier that I've actually just painted out. And again, this is for the similar thing. In the future, you're gonna see that I'm going to remove this mask from this modifier. And instead, I'm gonna go into the geometry node to basically set up it manually. And I'll tell you the reason in the future. Right now, let's actually just focus on grooming only. And as you can clearly see, the hairs are actually a bit too long. You can see that I am just gonna follow the sculpt. Grooming process is actually going to be same. So you can see that I'm just gonna add the guides one by one. Also, you can see that I'm actually giving this zigzagginess that you can see in the hairs from the start, even though you don't really need to do that because you're gonna see in the future we're gonna use modifiers to actually give this vibe in the beard. I don't know if the vibe is actually the right word or not, but you get the idea, right? Again, I'm actually doing the same thing, starting the guide from the edges, and by edges, I actually meant to say from the hairs are actually starting to grow. If you really want to, by the way, you can add multiple of guides and start grooming them simultaneously, and then just select one of them after you have groomed them simultaneously and try to clean them up. But I actually like to add the hairs one by one, guide one by one. Okay, so now you can see that the hairs are not perfectly symmetrical, and the reason is the head is not perfectly symmetrical. So you can see that there is a little bit of difference in both of these hairs, but I don't think it's actually going to make that big of a difference. At least I didn't worry about them as much. As you can see, this particular guide is pretty symmetrical. If you have asymmetry on your face, there is actually definitely a possibility that the guides won't be symmetrical, but because the hairs itself are actually such a random thing, I don't think it really matters that much unless you are going for something specific. You can see that I am actually just adding the guides, and the guides are itself not as many, like I've already added four. And you can see that we have already started getting a little bit of beard, like little bit of shape out of it. In the future, by the way, what we are gonna do, we are actually gonna create a mask for the clumps. We are gonna create a mask for the noise, and you're gonna see that in the future, in this particular video actually, for the beard, cause I really wanted some of the clumping happening only in few of the parts. So you're gonna see that I'm actually just going to create a mask for that, so that not every part of the beard is actually gonna get clumped. And I also wanted a little bit of spirals in some particular areas, so I have actually created mask for that as well. And you're gonna see that in the future also. This is basically just the first step. After that, we are gonna go into the modifiers and start adding a little bit of mask to tell Blender where we want clumping, where we want noise, and where we want the spiral effect. I don't. I think I should actually know. I think the curl effect is what Blender calls it, or maybe everyone else calls it. I might be the only one who's saying it's spiral, but curls, yes, curls are the things that I was actually talking about. In this particular case, I am basically just following the sculpt that I've did, even though you cannot see the sculpt. I basically just enable it, time to time to see how exactly the hairs are looking. You can see that this particular part is gonna have a clump. That clump is actually gonna go in this particular shape. So you're gonna see that I'll actually create a black and white mask. This is not really making sense right now, but it is actually gonna make sense in the future when I do use the mask to basically tell Blender that I need a clump in this particular area. The reason that you can create these masks is basically why using geometry nodes with the hair grooming system is actually so beneficial, because you can literally tell Blender that you want clumping or any of those modify like curl, clump, noise. Like you can tell Blender that you want these in specific area, and you can create a mask, so you basically get so much control because of that, because you can do so much of manual stuff. Right now, again, I'm actually just grooming. There isn't really special going on. As you can see that I'm basically using the clothes as a guide as well, to place my guides in a way that they don't really intersect with the clothes. That's why I think it's actually important to make the clothes first and then do the grooming. Okay, so in the reference, I basically have like the clump of hairs going like this, and that's why you can see that I'm actually trying to recreate something similar with this guide, and that's the reason that I'm doing it. By the way, while I'm actually, creating the guides, there is one thing that I can talk about. In the interpolation hair curve, where we have actually inserted the image as a mask, it is not the right way of doing stuff, and I'll actually show you why. When you start adding the clumping, you're gonna realize that the clumps are not following the guide. which means that the guides that we are creating so that the clump would be like these guides, it just does not follow those because of that image. And in order to fix that, you're gonna have to go into the geometry nodes and basically set up something similar manually. Instead of using the image in the modify, you're gonna have to use the image in the density like option in the geometry nodes, and I'll actually show you in the future because right now it might not be making sense. Beard might actually look complicated in the render, but it's actually one of the simplest thing to do. You can see how simple the guides are right now. I am actually just placing the guides on the clothes so that it basically looks natural, and you're gonna see in the future that it basically makes sense how I approach it in the modifier. Okay, so in this modifier, you can see that in the mask texture, we have used the image. And because of this, we are not going to be able to use the clumping nicely. And you're going to see that in the future as well. What we need to do, we need to remove it from the image texture. And instead, we're going to have to go into the geometry nodes and put that image texture into the density mask area. So you can see that we have a density mask, right? And in this particular in this particular slot we have to use the image texture, and it is gonna be possible. I think you can use that right here, you have this checkbox on the right side through which you can select the image, or maybe not. I think it's actually easier to do in the geometry nodes, and I'm gonna show you how to do that in the geometry nodes itself. Right now, again, I'm actually just grooming it. The reason that I've actually talked about is because you can see the modifier now. So I thought it's actually a good time to talk about it again. So I've just talked about it. Again, it's actually super important to look at your groom from all the sides, just to rotate around, just like you do with your sculpt. You need to make sure that your hairs actually look good from all the sides. So always rotate your model around to see how exactly the groom is looking. And now you can see that I am basically just adding the guides in the center. I basically can control the center hairs a bit better. The guides are not gonna be like as dense as we have created in the head here. The guides are actually gonna be pretty simple in the beard. You're gonna see that most of the stuff is actually gonna be done with the modifiers, and you're gonna see the power of modifiers basically in this tutorial. But until I'll actually go into using the modifiers, I'm actually just gonna let you watch me. Okay, so we are actually kind of done with the grooming. You can see that I've actually started adding the clump modifier, and you can see that it didn't work. And in order to fix that, as you can see that I am in the geometry nodes. Now, in order to actually use this image, we've already done this in the head here. You can see that I am basically just copying the name attribute, and now I'm selecting the image here, and instead of putting that into the mask, I am actually putting it into the density mask. And now all the guides are basically the clump. So this is what we wanted. We are basically getting it. All the guides were actually meant to be clumps. That's why we have actually added those guides in specific way. But you can see that some of the clumps in the front is something that we actually don't want. And in order to fix that, we're gonna have to create a mask. Now, this is a commentary, and I don't remember exactly when I'm gonna be creating those. But before the mask, I think I'm actually just gonna fix some of the guides after you have added the clumping. There is a possibility that the hairs are basically intersecting with the clothes, and I am actually fixing that intersection right now. Also, in the front of the beard, we don't want this clumping effect, at least as strong as we have right now. So we're also gonna have to remove that through a mask, and we are not actually getting hairs in this particular area, so I think I might have to repaint the beard mask as well. So there is gonna be a whole lot of tweaking that's gonna happen in this video, so don't you like get confused. I've already talked about what I'm gonna do right now. As you can see that I am actually kind of back to grooming, and I've already shown you, by the way, how I have created this effect. If the clumping modifier is not working because you have used the image texture into the image mask, just remove it from there and instead use the same setup that I've used. That way your clumping is actually gonna work with the guide. So right now I'm actually just fixing the groom, and I am just fixing the guides. So let's actually see for how long I am gonna be doing that. Okay, so in this particular case, I actually kind of wanted the beard to be a little bit pointy from the front, and that's why I'm actually just changing the guide length in order to basically get something similar. And yeah, that's basically what I'm doing right now. So yeah, you can see that the beard is actually kind of pointy, like a little bit. Okay, so now you can see by changing the factor, you can decide whether you have a clump or not, which means factor is gonna be that particular setting where you need to insert mask to tell Blender whether you actually want clump or not. Before I actually do that, you can see that I'm just changing some of these settings so that I basically can figure out if there is a way without having to, create a manual mask. After changing a little bit of settings, as you can see that I've actually added the noise modifier. This is also one of those ways that basically makes your hairs a little bit natural. So that's why I've basically added it. Now you can see that I'm just changing the distance and stuff. Basically, you can see the settings that I'm changing and the effect that I'm getting. So the idea is again pretty simple. The first idea is to create some flyaway hairs, which means that we are going to use the same setup that we have used in the head hair. And that also means some percentage, for example 5 or 10% hairs are actually going to use the noise, and the rest of the hairs are not going to use the noise. So we are just going to be copying the same setup. As you can see that I am just finding out the same setup, and I am actually just going to copy it. So curve info, random value, and the node, sorry, not the node but the color ramp is basically what I'm using right now. So you're actually gonna see that as I'm gonna do changes in the color ramp, it is basically just gonna be appearing in the hairs itself. And as you can see, the value is again the strength, something similar we have seen in the head hair. And the more contrast I give to the color ramp, the less the hairs are gonna have those noise. Both of these settings are basically correlatable, and the more contrast you give, the less hairs you are actually gonna get, and the more value you're gonna give, the more the strength you're gonna get. And I'm talking about the color ramp right now. So in this particular case, you can see that I'm actually just changing a little bit of settings in the clump hair. And now I'm just trying to figure out if the curl hairs are actually gonna work, because I do want some curling happening in some of the part. But right now you can clearly see that it actually is, we have to play with some settings. The radius is a bit too much, so I have to decrease the radius, and we are getting the curls, so that's pretty nice. But again, just like the clumping, the curls are basically everywhere, and I don't want that. So in order to actually give the limitation to the curl modifier, we have to create a mask to tell Blender where we want the curls and where we don't want the curls. Right now you can see that curls are everywhere, and this is not something that I actually want. Right now I'm actually just figuring out the settings, like settings for the curls itself. I know that I don't want curls everywhere, but I am just figuring out the settings that's gonna work best, and then I'll actually go into the mask creation process. In this particular case, I am actually just trying to figure out which one of the settings are actually gonna work best, and I'm just trying to figure out what is working and what's not working. So this is again just trial and errors. I have actually added one more layer of noise, and this is actually one of the coolest thing about modifiers. You can actually add as many as you like. So I have added one more, and you can see that I'm actually just trying to give a little bit of noise on top of the clumping and on top of the curling that we have created. So right now I'm actually just trying to figure out the settings that's gonna make the hairs look natural. I know that I've actually talked about the mask creation, which we are gonna be doing in the future because this is a commentary over a video. I have no idea when I'm gonna be doing that. I am actually doing the same thing. As you can see, I am basically just trying to create some flyaway hairs, which means that I want some small percentage of hairs to have noise, and the others basically don't have any noise. And as you can see, as I'm increasing the contrast, the lesser hairs basically have noise. And if I were to decrease the value of the white, the strength also decreases. So the reason that I've actually did that is to create some flyaway hairs and to create some randomness in the beard. Like this example is actually pretty clear. That's what I've been trying to do. You also have the seed value that you can actually try and change. In this particular case, now that I basically have set up the color ramp and some of the flyaway hairs, I can actually play around with the scale or the shape to figure out which settings are working and which settings are not working. Right now, it's actually just me trying to figure out the setting. There isn't really a thought process. I'm just changing the slider and seeing what it basically does. And if it actually is something doing that I like, that I'm just letting the setting to be. And if I'm not liking what it is doing to the hairs, that I'm actually just going back. This is actually just a trial and error thing. I am not really doing something that I basically have learned, like remembered. There is no setting over here that I've actually remembered. I am just going with the flow, just changing the settings and seeing how exactly it is making the hairs look like. And if the hairs are looking nice, then I am just staying it with it. And if the hairs are not looking nice, that I basically just do an undo. Okay, so I have actually added the frizz modifier, and you're gonna see that I think I'm actually just going to remove it because I didn't really like the way it make the beard look. I think in the future, I'm pretty sure by the way that I'll actually just remove it. Right now, I am just playing with the settings. The reason I didn't like this modifier in this particular case is because it actually made the hairs a little bit jaggedy, and I didn't really wanted that. I think that's why I basically have removed the modifier, as you can see. Okay, so right now I'm actually figuring out the clump and the curls, and you can see that I basically have just used the guide hairs, like the guides, in order for the clump to happen. Basically, you can see that I think now I'm actually just gonna start creating a mask. I actually don't remember if I do. I think it is actually a good time that I do that because we have clump basically everywhere, and the curl, which I don't want. Like I kind of want the clumps to be in this particular guide that I've selected. This is the guide that is gonna have the curl around itself. So I am actually gonna have to go to the mask and make sure that this particular area basically have the most curls. This is what I'm gonna do right now. I am actually just playing with the settings, and this is something that I actually do a lot. If I were to just keep on doing that, you just gonna have to figure out on your own what I'm basically doing, because there is no way for me to explain that. I think right now I'm actually doing that. So you can see that I've added the image texture onto the factor of the curl. As you can see that I'm creating a new image curl beard mask, which means that this is a mask that's going to control where I want the curls and where I don't want the curls. So this is what we are gonna do now. And as we are gonna be painting it with the white, you're gonna see that the curls are gonna appear. Now, one more important thing, you can just paint it with pure white and then use the color ramp node to basically lower down the value. But in my case, what I've done, I basically have just painted it with like the exact strength that I wanted. And as you can see, wherever we are painting it with white, we are actually getting the curls. So you can see that I'm lowering down the strength right now. And you can do that in the geometry node with the color ramp afterward. But I am just painting it with the strength that I really wanted to be, because some of the areas, for example, in the front of the beard, I am still painting a little bit of, just a little bit of curls. That's why I'm basically just using the strength in the map itself, so that I don't really have to, change the strength afterward in the geometry node. And I'm just using, you can see the strength is at point 0.1, and the reason that it is actually so low is so that I basically can get small little increment in the strength, because I actually want more curls on one particular area, but I still want just a little bit of hint of curls in other areas as well. So this is what I actually talked about previously, me just painting a mask for the curls. We are also going to be painting a mask for the clump, and this is actually one of the reason that I feel like that the new hair system, this hair system is actually so powerful, that because you can actually do all this stuff like can you remember doing something similar with the previous hair system? I don't think you can do that, but in this particular case you can, and you can layer so many of these effects on top of each other. So these are some of the things that actually makes this hair system so powerful. Right now, at the time of me recording this, they didn't actually had the option to simulate the hairs, but we are actually just creating a portrait and the hairs are not gonna move. So I think it's totally okay for us. But if you are using this hair system for animation, for example, then you need to understand that right now you cannot actually simulate these. Just keep that in mind. And now you can see that we have actually added the clump, and obviously we're gonna be creating a mask for it. And because again the reason is simple, we don't actually want clumps to be everywhere, so we are gonna create the mask, or maybe we are actually just going to use the same mask that we've used for the curls. I think I don't really remember it correctly, but we'll see. Maybe I actually create a different mask. Okay, so this is embarrassing. I forgot that it was the name attribute node that is actually supposed to go back, like go behind the image texture. And I was just figuring out which node it was, and I had to look it up. I am actually so dumb that I basically have created this so many times, and I've still managed to forget the name of the node. So it was the name attribute node that I was actually looking for. Now you can see that I'm basically just gonna be creating a mask for the clumps now. As you can see that we are actually just painting our clumps now, so that's pretty nice, right? This is what we we've talked about previously, and now we are basically just doing the same thing in the practice. So these are some of the areas which are gonna have more clumps, and that's why you can see that I'm actually painting those over here. But I'm still giving just a little bit of hint in the center as well. I am actually painting with the strength basically. So if I want more clumping in particular area, then I'll actually just increase the strength. But in this particular case, I don't really want that much clumping to happen. So I am actually just using the lower strength. Okay, so again, I'm actually just gonna change a little bit of settings. This is I've already talked about it. I actually do a whole lot of trial and error, and this is actually just me trying to change some settings to see if it is actually making the beard look a bit better or not. I can say that this is definitely not the final look. If you have seen the render, we are gonna go there. But yeah, these are some of the steps that I actually took to get there, and it is still looking a little bit too, CG right now. So we need to actually make it a bit more natural, a bit more random, and we're gonna do that. So don't you worry about it. Yeah, right now you can see that I've actually added the trim hair curves, and this modifier is basically going to shorten some of the hairs, which means that with the factor of 0.5, I think I cannot remember the setting. It is basically just going to trim down some of the hairs to make the hairs look more random. This is basically it. We are actually just going to keep on adding the modifiers. We are actually just going to keep on changing the settings until it actually starts to look better. And you're going to basically just see the whole process now. Right now, I figured out that maybe adding a noise on top of everything is actually going to make everything look better. So I am actually just doing that, as you can see. And after that, I think that I've added the noise, and after that, I'm actually gonna add the clump on top of this, if I can remember it correctly. But yeah, right now this is how it looks. But we have basically just lost all the things that we have painted out. For example, we have lost our curls, we have lost our clumps, but we did actually have managed to get a little bit of randomness. But we definitely need to make sure that we basically get all those stuff back again. I am actually creating a mask for the noise, and against the purpose is pretty simple. I basically want noise in some areas and I don't want noise in some areas. So in order to do that, I'm actually just creating a mask. Maybe I figured out that noise is making the hairs look better, but I don't really want noise everywhere, so I have to create a mask, and that's what I'm doing right now. So now that we basically have everything set up, let's actually start adding the noise. So let's see. I am gonna add the noise in the front, and the noise itself is actually making the beard look a bit weirder. That's because the strength is actually a bit too much. I don't want the beard strength to be that much. So again, I've told you that I am painting the strength itself in the mask, which means that the strength right now is actually a bit too much, and you're gonna see that I'll actually go back the strength. So I am just gonna go into the local view, and I'll actually just start changing the opacity of the white. But right now I'm not changing, sorry, I'm basically just adding the noise wherever I actually want the noise to be. So now you can see that I'm in the local view, and now I'll basically just start to push it back a little bit. So I have selected the neighbor color, like the color that the darker color, and as you can see how it actually made the beard look like. So I am kind of liking this color, or maybe I'll just go back. I think I'll actually lower it down a bit, as you can see. So you can see that with the mask, I'm also painting the strength. I am basically just doing the same thing in one image. So yeah, you can see how the noise is looking right now, and we need to do something similar with these areas. I think I'm actually liking how the noise is looking right now, like the strength of the noise. So I'm basically just giving the same strength to all these areas. So this is how it looks like, and we have actually added noise in some areas, and we have basically just ignored all the other areas. If you really want to, as you can see that I'm actually doing right now, I am adding a little bit of noise in some of the other areas as well. But these noise are pretty controlled. I am not really adding noise everywhere, and also in some areas the noise is more, and in some areas the noise is less. Again, you can actually do the same thing with the weight paint or the vertex color. You don't really have to create another image. In my case, I am like, I don't know why, by the way, I could have just done the same thing, but it just didn't came into my mind that I can do the same thing with the. If you are doing the same thing, just use the weight paint and the vertex colors. I think it's color attributes now, right? I think Blender have changed the name to color attributes. You can see that I have basically completely created the noise, and now we are actually just playing around with some of the settings to see how exactly it is looking. So by changing the values, you can see you can basically just change the strength, and that's what I've actually just did. Okay, so in this case, as you can see that I'm actually changing the clump mask, which means that I kind of don't want clump in some of these areas that I'm painting out. You can like literally see what I'm doing right now, and just trial and error. Again, I've told you that it is not a step by step process. I am actually just trying my best to explain you what I'm trying to do, and I am actually just trying to remove some of the clumping in these particular areas. Also, I'm trying to fill up these gaps that you can actually see in between the beards through this removal of clump, so that the gap, as you can see, can actually be filled. So these are the two things that I'm actually doing right now, filling up these gaps. Maybe I'm actually just gonna do it right now. I mean, you can see that there is basically a gap between the beard, and you can see through it. So I am actually just trying to, remove the clumping from that particular area, so that a little bit of hairs can, block the path. Okay, so now that I've done with the painting of that mask, I basically have duplicated the noise, and I have also changed the seed value so that different amount of hairs basically could be influenced. And now the idea is pretty simple. I think I'm actually gonna lower down the amount, or maybe increase the contrast. Let's actually see. Right now, I'm only figuring out the factor, like the strength of this particular node, and I am just going to replace it with this setup where I can actually, control how many, like the percentage of hairs I basically want it to be influenced. So in order to do that, I am basically using this setup. The idea is to just create more flyaway hairs and more random variation. So this is basically what I'm doing right now. And now I'm actually at the other the noise modifier, and I think the idea is to increase the contrast, and that's basically what I'm gonna do right now, I think, because that is the only reason I must have added the color ramp node. Okay, so this is the clump hair node, which means that I am clumping in this particular setup. You can actually see the name on the geometry node window, clump hair curves. So just in case if you are confused, I am just letting you know. You can also see that these particular hairs were coming way too out. So I am actually just pushing them back in now, because obviously they were not really looking nice. So again, just trial and error stuff. I think that these hairs were not looking right. So I'm just changing them now. Okay, so right now I'm actually just trying to increase the number of the hairs, because in the end we are gonna get this much amount of hairs in the final render. So I think it's actually better to just look at it, what we are gonna look at the final. And yeah, the beard is actually looking pretty nice. And I've just noticed that this video is also about to get end. So yeah, this is basically it, guys. That's how I have created the beard. And yeah, this was all just trial and error. I don't think that I really have anything else to say, but bye bye.